Psychologist Daniel Early once performed an incredible experiment on his audience. He made them write down the last 2 digits of their social security numbers. Basically, it's just a random 2-digit number. He then asked them how happy they would be to pay that price from those 2 digits for an item that he had. Having asked them that and set them each that individual different framing for the potential price of this item, there was then an auction. And those members in the audience whose 2 digits were a high number were willing to bid around 100% higher than the members of the audience whose 2-digit numbers was a low overall number, even though, of course, their social security number should have no connection to the value of the item that was being auctioned. Now, that is the power of anchoring. How an initial stated number or value of something can radically change our expectation of what we think the value actually is. And this will work on any human when bartering for the sale of a house mat or an entire house. It affects traders buying stocks and shares, anchoring in on the first value that they buy a stock at rather than its true value. And it even affects lawmakers assessing crime cases due to initial information that they've been fed. Now, in some ways, this weird cognitive flaw does make some sense. If I told you that this episode is going to be full of incredible decision biases that will help you become a more rational human being who is less likely to waste money, then hopefully that will have set an anchor for you to make an informed decision that it would be worth you spending time listening. As humans, there are just lots of moments that we encounter where we can only use an initial impression of something to decide what we do next based on what we expect the value will be. But there are times, especially when it comes to numbers, that this can be hijacked. Let's say the sale price of a pack of cookies in the store, it has a 40% off the normal price sticker, and you've been given the illusion of a great deal. If you go around an auto dealership, the forecourt might have a very expensive car there as an anchor to make an overpriced but cheaper car look very attractive, although there's nothing exceptional about the deal you've been offered. Studies have actually shown that even when participants were warned that anchoring could be used against them to affect their decisions, they still fall into traps. The only people who seem to have some immunity to it are experts in the given field. So a car salesman who knows the real price of a car is less likely to be suckered by an anchored-based deal. But there is one strategy that consistently helps. It's called consider the opposite strategy, which is not the most innovative of names, but it does what it says on the tin. So if you're presented with an anchor, you should consider the opposite. If the last 2 digits of your social security number are very high, say 92, you should try considering what you would think if your last 2 digits were 08 instead. Now, obviously, you never decide the price of what you pay for something based on your last 2 digits of your security number. But let's say you're in a store and there's a pack of cookies that are currently on offer for $2 and they used to be $3. It might seem enticing, a whole dollar off. What if you tried considering that the pack of cookies used to be $1 and now they're $2, $1 more expensive than yesterday? Overall, neither of those previous potential prices matter. All that matters is a bag of cookies and they're $2. And that's all you should really think about. And you shouldn't be blinded by if $2 is better than $3, because that's not what you need to think about. So doing the consider the opposite just helps you balance that like price manipulation warfare on your mind to actually make a rational decision when you're buying things instead of seeing deals that aren't actually deals. On that, hello and welcome to this episode on Applied Psychology with me, Samuel Webster, where we dive into how psychology impacts you in the real world, and today's episode specifically on decision biases and how they might affect our purchasing behavior. I did a popular episode last week on ego-based cognitive biases, and this week I had a set of 15 biases to go through based on how we process information and make decisions, and I realized it would be like a 2-hour episode, and I decided to just talk about ones that influence buying behaviors. And there are so many different biases out there. This is probably going to end up like a 5-part series on all the different biases that affect the ways we go through life and how we can become slightly more rational as human beings. Leading on from the anchoring bias, we have the framing effect. For example, if a product is targeted as a healthy choice for consumers, it might say something like 90% fat-free, because that frames it much better than saying 10% of this product is purely fat. It conveys the exact same information, but it frames it very differently. It's something I actually really hate about the food aisle. You'll see a yogurt that has all the healthy brand colors on it with a skinny, happy person holding their stomach and smiling about how healthy they are with their yogurt. It might even say fat-free on the package, and yet, if you look at the actual nutritional information, it will be full of sugar, it doesn't contain any live bacteria or even much protein, and it really shouldn't be branded as a health product. Anyway, my own frustrations aside, the framing effect was first proved by Daniel Kahneman, showing that participants in the study overwhelmingly preferred a medical intervention that could save 200 lives out of 600 versus the same medical intervention that had a 33% chance of saving any of the lives in the 600 people or a 66% chance of not saving lives. It's the exact same information, but one description made people feel very comfortable and the other made them feel very uncomfortable. This effect has been used by businesses all over the planet, from pricing strategies as simple as $9.99 instead of $10, or sticking a limited edition sticker on the label, to the way that they advertise. A gym subscription advert will always focus on who you could become, this good-looking, smiley person with a six-pack, compared to focusing on who you want to avoid being. They obviously don't have adverts featuring depressed, overweight people with health problems, because it's just a bit off-putting. Then, besides your wallet and the things you purchase, framing can affect who you vote for. Politicians will always spin things with an emotional edge to make you favor whatever it is that they are doing, and they'll put a doom and gloom aspect on anything else that isn't to do with them. They'll say things like, we're putting money back into the pockets of hard-working families, whilst our opponent only cares about billionaires having more private jets. Vote for me because I'm wonderful. It's all just emotive manipulation, designed to simplify a complex topic without explaining any of the real statistics or data, half of which they don't even truly know themselves anyway. The positive thing here about learning from the framing effect is that you can use it yourself to reframe challenges as opportunities. You can find the silver lining in a disaster. Breaking your mug isn't so terrible if it's a chance to get a better one. I lost half my listeners on the show due to messing with my publishing settings. It's a chance for me to actually reflect and push the podcast in a direction that I find more interesting, such as epic deep dives into nature of psychology and cognitive biases, and do things that I just find truly interesting that could attract more listeners in the long run. So, besides my woes or delight, depending on how I personally frame it, we couldn't talk about the framing effect without mentioning the decoy effect. Now, if you've ever been to a restaurant, you know that it's kind of embarrassing to order the cheapest bottle of wine. Well, it's actually just a decoy anyway. It's there designed to get someone who isn't into throwing their money away liberally on a dry white with a fancy name to instead buy the second cheapest wine. Of course, the waiter will be there ready to tell you what a good choice you've made buying the second cheapest wine. Yet, the cheapest wine was just there to add a bottom-up anchoring effect that you just have to make sure that you're paying more than that for. Another way that you might see this in the food industry is perhaps in movie theaters selling popcorn. If it's ever blown your mind that a medium-sized popcorn could be $10, yet a large-sized popcorn, which is twice the size, is only $12. Well, the reality here is that the popcorn only a few cents to make, but by pricing the popcorn in this way, the cinema company has made this large popcorn suddenly feel really good value for you to buy, and you only have to pay a few extra dollars and you can feel really good about your purchase compared to this $10 medium popcorn, when in fact, if they'd priced the medium popcorn at $6, you'd have bought the $6 medium because that's all the popcorn you need. You don't need a box of popcorn that's bigger than your dog, but you buy it anyway because of anchoring. Now, the decoy effect isn't just the cheapest item to look out for. The decoy effect also works with businesses placing a much higher priced item that they don't even expect you to buy, but it raises your level of comfort in spending more than you planned. Let's say you go into the shop and you review like a budget camera versus a mid-tiered camera. If you see a third camera that's much more higher priced, it will make you feel a lot more comfortable spending that little bit more to buy the mid-tiered camera, even though you don't actually need the extra few features it has. Things like subscription bundles do this all the time, where they will have some crazy option with all the bells and whistles that no one ever buys, but it does mean that it can say their prices start from $20, and when you land on the buying page, you're going to choose the $40 option because that $40 option seems really good value compared to the stupidly priced $150 option for things that you're never going to buy anyway. Well, we've talked enough about some of the different tools of framing, and there are lots of other ways our spending habits can be manipulated by our own cognitive biases. Up next, we have the gambler's fallacy, and this really highlights just how bad humans are at handling statistics. We have this innate attraction within us for some kind of mystical explanation or balancing force within the universe that doesn't actually exist. And you might think, no, Sam, no, I'm a reasonable person. I don't believe in anything mystical or balancing forces within the universe. But I will prove it to you that you do. Let's say you are next to a roulette wheel where there's 50 different numbers, half of which are black, half of which are red, and you know that there's always a 50-50 chance of one or the other. And let's ignore the fact that roulette wheels usually have one that isn't either black or red, because it doesn't help us right now. So in this example, the wheel is spun 3 times in a row and it always lands on black. Yet you know it's a completely fair wheel and it's not being manipulated. So now that it's landed on black so many times, it'll feel very unlikely that it will land on black again a 4th time in a row, because it should land on black and red an even amount of times. So you're naturally going to expect that it'll land on red next. And if someone gave you $1,000 to bet on black or red, free money, nearly every rational person at this point would vote on red, even though actually the next time the wheel is spun, it is just as likely to land on black or red, because it's a 50-50 chance. It doesn't matter what just happened the last 3 times. If that hasn't convinced you, how about this? The lottery numbers 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. That feels like a very unlikely sequence to happen, that if I gave you a free lottery ticket that had those numbers on, you'd be like, what's the point of this waste of a ticket? It's never going to happen. It is so oddly specific, and we know that whenever we see the lottery numbers, they always come out more random than that. Yet, actually, those 5 numbers in that specific order are just as likely as any other specific sequence that has ever happened in the lottery. 17 being the first number that gets picked is just as likely as specifically the number 1 being picked first or the number 23. Now, number 18 coming out as the second number is just as likely as the number 5 being picked or the number 30. Yet, we'll feel an innate expectation that a more balanced set of random feeling numbers will happen spread across the range of the 50 potential numbers that could come out in the lottery, even though that is actually madness. Yet humans find it almost impossible to believe streaks can occur by chance. If you don't gamble or play the lottery, you might be like, yeah, whatever, this doesn't matter to me. But actually, this is a really awful little flaw in our minds, because besides making us terrible gamblers, it can affect the most important decisions that we do need rationality for. We might get an awkward feeling in an exam where we have a random multiple choice section, and if we have to answer 5 C's in a row, we're like, maybe I'm messing something up. This isn't random enough. But it gets worse than that. It's proven that a judge deciding asylum-seeking applications will be 19% more likely to reject an application if they just accepted the last 2. That's completely nuts. In the same way, you're more likely to get a loan application approved if the person deciding applications rejected the last 2. Like, actual fair treatment of life-changing decisions does not happen because people are warped by their innate feeling that there should be some kind of even spread in the universe of stuff happening, an even amount of randomness. Because statistically, there's nothing saying that the guy deciding loan applications should approve every single application in one day and then refuse every single application the second day. But instead, he feels like he should be balanced. Every few applications, there should be some rejections and some approvals. And that's just stupid. So for yourself, it is really worth examining what are things that are interdependent and rely on other stuff versus things that are independent whenever you have to make any decision. So something that is independent is a coin toss. Every time it is flipped, there is a 50-50 chance of what side it lands on, regardless of what happened last flip. Every time you make a decision on head or tails, the chances are always the same. Something that is interdependent would be the chance of an entrepreneur's business succeeding. If they've ran several businesses before, there is a correlation that they will run another business successfully. Or the time and effort that you put into studying will affect your exam results. That is interdependent information. Or the amount of people attracted to you is related to how you dress, how you talk, how you make people feel. And there are actually so many reasons for things, and the word reason is basically an interdependent link between two events. There are so many reasons for things happening in the world that humans find it incredibly hard to be objective when there isn't a reason for something. And this is why very rational and even skeptical people who don't believe in astrology will still actually technically have this weird sense that there's a balancing force in the universe, as I said first. So you should really be informed about this. Obviously, casinos love this gambler's fallacy because it creates the illusion in the gambler's mind that they can predict where the balance of the dice or roulette wheel will go next, even though there is no such thing. So just for yourself, don't let yourself get suckered into it. Moving on, you may have heard that humans are 5 times more averse to a loss than a potential gain. Yet, interestingly, we will continue to lose money to prevent ourselves from feeling like we lost money in the first place. This is the sunk cost fallacy. Of course, there is the gambler who throws good money after bad, who's trying to reverse the loss, yet actually, all humans are prone to doing things just as stupid. Most similarly, people continue to invest in a failing stock or business investment if they have already committed significant resources, even when they shouldn't be throwing more money after bad. And that's not just ordinary foolish people. Sir Isaac Newton himself, who invented modern basic principles of physics and discovered how gravity works, even he did this. He had a sizable investment in the South Sea Company, and this was a company that was on a tear, it had a market monopoly, and it was going up and up. But as it started to fall, and he was losing money, he invested a little bit more. It fell even further and really fast, and so he invested a lot more money. And then the South Sea Company went to zero, and Sir Isaac Newton lost an incredible fortune in the process. Newton was so distraught by his losses that he remarked, "I can calculate the motion of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people." So just because you're not that foolish and perhaps a bit more educated than other people, you can still get suckered into this fallacy. But let's put financial investing and gambling aside. There are other forms of sunk cost. Just time commitment alone to a project or even a partner can make us reticent to give up. I'm sure you'll have seen friends who know a partner isn't right for them, and yet they carry on with them. And some people even get married when they have all the signs and evidence there that the relationship won't work and they need to restart right now as soon as possible. That's a form of sunk cost fallacy. And people also continue to use things like outdated machinery or software that would be a lot more cost effective to replace in the long term, but they don't because it would feel like they're admitting to a loss. And it's just a very cruel irony that because we hate being wrong, we hate losing so much, that we'll actually blind ourselves to our errors and continue to lose just to avoid the feeling of accepting that loss. So just be humble and admit and accept your losses before you make further losses. Moving on. You may have heard that an experiment found that chimps throwing darts at potential stock picks were as accurate as predicting success as the average investment analyst. And if that sounds like a story that is too good to be true, it is a scientific finding that has been replicated several times. So, what makes people waste their times trying to predict things that they have no business predicting in general? Well, we have a few final biases that we can review here that cause this. The first is the overconfidence bias. Experiments found that people consistently had more confidence than they should do in predicting the future of things when it comes to stuff as unpredictable as the weather or political outcomes. I can honestly say that I did not predict Brexit would happen. And in 2015, when Donald Trump first began campaigning, he was given a 1% chance of becoming just the Republican candidate for president, let alone the president. And yet, a year later, we all know he became president. Now, besides making us bad investors or political predictors, it affects other parts of our life. We can be overconfident in our predictions of relationships or what we think someone wants and needs, leading us into all sorts of errors in communication and arguments and bad commitments. We can be overconfident in our career and our abilities and come up with wildly inaccurate project timelines for things, and it leads us to create unrealistic expectations and will fail ourselves and others. You'll also probably know some people or even yourself that do dumb stuff like drink driving or maintaining a smoking habit because we are overconfident that we will be okay, despite the fact we have to do quite a lot of mental gymnastics to ignore all the factual evidence against us. And because we quickly develop a sense of confidence, we can fail to find more information that's needed to make a rational decision because we feel we have the answers already. However, there is an intriguingly competing behavior called the information bias that also fuels our overconfidence to invest in things we shouldn't be investing in. Whether we're talking about stock investing, gambling, or important healthcare decisions, we can seek more information beyond the actual statistics we need to make a decision. And in fact, this extra information can create the illusion of being more informed and encourage this overconfidence when actually our statistics are no better, and sometimes even worse. In one study, Wall Street analysts were given 5 pieces of data to make a stock pick, and they then rated their certainty behind it. Then in the second part of the study, they were given 25 pieces of data to make their stock choice, and they then rated a much higher certainty in their prediction. Yet incredibly, with more information, their choices became worse. And it's because all this extra information wasn't as important as the essential data they got in the first 5 pieces, but it gave them the illusion of more certainty. Perhaps one of the most appealing things about Amazon as a website is the fact that you can always compare any item you want against several other things, and it gives you the illusion of certainty. Yet often those items might actually be affecting your framing, like a red herring anchor item that's overpriced and affecting your willingness to grab the feeling of a bargain now for the thing that you don't actually need anyway. So here are a few ways that you might be screwing yourself over when it comes to the information bias. Job seekers compiling more data about all the different potential jobs and finding new job after new job, and also finding out as much information about each company. And this can snowball into weeks of research instead of just applying to like 5 jobs a day because they need a job. In healthcare, people can do really excessive research online, which leads to confusion and anxiety, and inevitably they'll always find a reason that they possibly have cancer. And this certainly blocks informed decision-making. When it comes to financial planning and investing, we can check stock markets, Bitcoin prices, the news, maybe several times a day, because there is always a market to sell you news-grabbing headlines, and this can lead to emotional and irrational decision-making from our knee-jerk reactions instead of being calm and collected, which is obviously how you need to be to make good investments. And then in relationships, we can over-monitor a potential partner's behavior, trying to find more data about stuff, and that leads to unnecessary stress and strain on the relationship. So basically, extra information can create overwhelm, so we don't actually see the rational choice in front of us clearly, and we can become more convinced of what is the wrong decision. And I think the fact that a monkey throwing a dart at a newspaper list of stocks is able to outperform the average analyst just really shows how we can get a little bit lost in following all of this information coming at us when in fact we could just chill out and not waste so much of our time. Who knows? Perhaps we actually do this because of the sunk cost fallacy, and because we've wasted our time deciding where to invest our money, we feel we should waste even more time looking into it. I don't know. Now, the important thing here is there are so many decision biases that I sadly could not fit them all into the episode today. I started this little series with 9 of the ego-based cognitive biases last week, and this week we just covered 7 of the decision-based cognitive biases that affect some of our financial decisions. We have at least 7 more decision-based biases before we'll then get into the 15 or so perception-based biases, and it's a joy to be digging into all of them. So if you did enjoy this episode, I would check out the ego-based biases last week and stay tuned for the rest of the cognitive biases in this series. And I have to say that over half of this series came from research by Daniel Kahneman, so I should definitely recommend his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, if you want a long technical read. I've also put links to some of the research and fact claims in the description. And if you do feel like I've said anything that you think is incorrect, I am merely searching for truth. I am always happy to be fact-checked and love new data and findings. I have nothing to try and sell and promote when it comes to psychology and science. I'm just keen to promote real psychology and celebrate how interesting it is. Any support on that mission is, of course, appreciated, and a good comment or rating or sharing the episode with a friend does go a long way. On that, life is too short to waste our time picking stocks and reading all the latest market information when a monkey could be doing it better, or to waste our time comparing the next mouse mat we want against 20 other mouse mats. So perhaps use some of your free time to climb some more trees or whatever else floats your boat. Remember to be kind to yourself and smile at strangers. Thank you so much for listening.
Go you!
Your consistency to reach the end of an episode is legendary.
My hero!
If you have any ideas or feedback for the show, I'm always interested to hear from you.
You're the best!
Studies show we need time for information to sink in, so I'm going to give you a 5-second pause, silence, to reflect on one idea from the show before you jump back into your busy life. Ready and go.